So welcome to Joe Biden's liberal America, where the Supreme Court makes it easier to have a gun and overturn Roe v. Wade after 50 years of precedent. This is not what a functioning democracy looks like. We're still living in Trump's America. Nothing has fundamentally changed. It's just gotten worse. The policies that Trump wanted to carry out are now being carried out under Joe Biden's watch.
President Trump, on behalf of all the MAGA patriots in America, I want to thank you for the historic victory for life in the Supreme Court yesterday.
The Supreme Court is on a rampage. Great news if you love guns. It's not great news if you think that people should have the right to have an abortion. All of U.S. institutions are fairly undemocratic because it's a representative democracy that doesn't really represent the people. But even in that world of very undemocratic institutions, the Supreme Court stands out. There's no accountability. They're lifelong appointments, basically monarchs. And it's incredibly concentrated power in the hands of the few. A bunch of really out-of-touch people. And they're basically ideologues, especially the ones on the right. I mean, they're just fearless and shameless. One of the worst Supreme Court justices on the court right now is Clarence Thomas, extremely right-wing. And after the verdict on abortion, he called for the Supreme Court to reconsider its past rulings on other issues like contraception, same-sex marriage, and same-sex relationships. As much as Joe Biden likes to present himself as on the liberal side of the court, we should remember that he helped Clarence Thomas get on the court. This was actually, interestingly enough, kind of an early example of the weaponization of identity politics. Clarence Thomas is African American, and he accused people during his confirmation hearing of engaging in a high-tech lynching.
As a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves.
And that high-tech lynching was daring to question him about the sexual harassment allegations which Anita Hill brought forth during those hearings. She had worked with Clarence Thomas and accused him with very credible allegations of sexual harassment.
He spoke about acts that he had seen in pornographic films involving such matters as women having sex with animals and films showing group sex or rape scenes. On several occasions, Thomas told me graphically of his own sexual prowess.
Anita Hill took and passed a lie detector test. Under pressure from Republicans on the committee, however, Chairman Biden called the test inconclusive and announced the results would not be placed in the record.
One could argue that without Joe Biden, Clarence Thomas would not be on the Supreme Court today. We know the Republicans are awful. We know that the Republicans are terrible on abortion rights, reproductive freedom, all types of freedoms, basically. But I think what people are missing is how the Democrats enabled this. They've been in power. They've had the trifecta, which is the House, Senate, and presidency. Both Barack Obama and Joseph Biden promised to codify Roe v. Wade, and neither of them did it.
What would you do at the federal level, not only to ensure access to abortion, but to make sure that the judicial nominees that you will inevitably be able to pick are true to the core tenets of Roe v. Wade?
Well, the first thing I'd do as president is sign the Freedom of Choice Act.
The president and the vice president are devoted to ensuring that every American has access to health care, including reproductive health care. As such, the president is committed to codifying Roe.
Codify means protecting it, enshrining it into law. And of course, they could do that if they got rid of the filibuster. And of course, they could do that if they had any courage or convictions. But sadly, they don't. Let's also be clear that for the Democrats, reproductive freedom is much less important than maintaining the filibuster. So there's no reason that things are going to change just because we vote blue no matter who. They're basically asking us to do the same thing again and expect different results, which is the definition of insanity. Maybe according to Einstein, he probably didn't say that, but whatever, it's still a good turn of phrase. For Democrats, the question is always about norms and procedures, while with Republicans, it's about politics and power. It's a totally asymmetrical warfare, and Democrats show up to a gunfight with a knife, which is maybe an unfortunate analogy given the Supreme Court's recent decision on guns. But anyway, there's no way the Democrats didn't see this coming. Mitch McConnell has been planning this for ages. We see how the Republicans actually play hardball. They blocked Merrick Garland from being confirmed, and Obama could have appointed him in a recess appointment, but he didn't. Meanwhile, they put their guys on the court no matter what. This very decision was leaked months ago, so it's that much more inexcusable that the Democrats have not mobilized. All they've done is sat on their hands and I guess prepared their fundraising emails and poetry readings.
From time to time, I quote this poem by Ehud Manor. He's an Israeli. I will not be silent, for my country has changed her face. My country has changed her face.
This is Nancy's go-to poem. Apparently, she read it at J Street conference.
I can't keep silent in light of how my country's changed her face.
She also read it to argue for removing Trump.
I can't keep silent of how my country's changed her face.
It's a little diminishing returns at this point, if I'm being honest. We've heard it a lot. She should have been able to recognize that this was coming because the Democrats were not doing anything to protect Roe. Again, they promised to codify it and they didn't. Nancy Pelosi herself and Barack Obama both said that abortion rights were not a priority.
The Freedom of Choice Act is not my highest legislative priority.
So Nancy Pelosi's reaction to Roe v. Wade is fascinating for many reasons. One, of course, is that she spent her time stumping for and endorsing and getting out the vote and fundraising for Henry Cuellar.
Henry Cuellar was the only Democrat to vote with Republicans against codifying Roe last year.
And he defeated Jessica Cisneros. Now, why is that relevant? It's because he was anti-choice and she was pro-choice.
In this moment, we are watching the fall of Roe and the erosion of our fundamental rights. It necessitates a champion that's going to fight for our people's rights in this district. And I've always said that this race truly goes beyond South Texas. The last thing we want is to hold on to a slim Democratic majority and then have someone like Henry Cuellar who's going to keep signing with Republicans, and he could become the Joe Manchin of the House. We don't want Henry Cuellar to be the deciding vote on the future of our fundamental freedoms and rights in this country. We just can't risk that.
And here you have the heads of the party leadership actually stumping for the anti-choicer, which I think speaks volumes about what's important for them. What Nancy Pelosi has done since the decision has been announced is that she sent off emails trying to fundraise off of it, and she said that this is something we can fix at the ballot box in November. Now, I'm not very confident that the Dems are going to do that well in November no matter what, but I also think it's rich to say that you should just keep voting for us so that we can keep failing to do anything about Roe v. Wade, which is what they're doing. It's very cynical, and I can't help but think that on some level they prefer to have it this way so that they can have something to point to easily as distinguishing themselves from the Republicans. I mean, this didn't need to happen for many reasons. One is that RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, could have retired.
Right now you're not thinking at all about retiring, only because it's not clear who's going to be elected in the next election, unless you, of course, think it will be Hillary Clinton or some other Democrat.
I think I should do this job as long as I can do it.
Lots of people, including liberals who loved Ruth Bader Ginsburg, were arguing very respectfully that she should retire because she was older and she also had pancreatic cancer. But then you had this counter movement for her to just quote unquote keep planking. There are all these images of her planking, which is a yoga move, I think.
85 years old. She is the oldest justice on the Supreme Court, but she has made it very clear that she has no interest in retiring, which is good.
I would have suggested that she instead start retiring, and then she would have been replaced by an Obama appointee. Then, of course, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in today.
The 2020 death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a champion of reproductive rights, gave Trump his third nominee, who provided the key fifth vote.
But I think this actually speaks to a kind of individual neoliberal feminism, where feminism is about personal biography and achievements of the very powerful and not about power, which is something that Democrats or liberals always fail to grapple with. We need to be pressuring politicians to do the right thing. They're never going to do the right things on their own. We need to make it politically painful for politicians to carry on with the status quo. We should be demanding that the Democrats get rid of the filibuster. We should be out in the streets. We should be doing everything, but we can't expect the Democrats to save us because they haven't saved us so far, and they're certainly not going to start doing that now. It's also worth remembering that Biden ran as the guy who could get things done. He was the guy who knew how Washington, D.C. worked. He was a creature of the Senate. He knew how to work with Republicans. Well, it turns out Biden, not only do his ideas suck, but he has no idea what he's doing, or he has no idea how to work with Republicans. He has no idea how to get things done, or even worse, he knows how to get things done and he doesn't want to get things done. But I will give Biden credit for one thing. When Joe Biden said in a private fundraiser nothing would fundamentally change, he was referring to the way that basically rich people would live in his America. But we didn't realize that he meant nothing would fundamentally change between Trump and him. And in many ways, nothing has fundamentally changed. The policies that Trump carried out and wanted to carry out are now being carried out under Joe Biden's watch. But we don't even have the unintentional hilarity of Donald Trump to get us through it. It's like the Trump presidency never ended. This is not what a functioning democracy looks like. The people who are up in arms about Trump should be up in arms about Biden. In a world dominated by corporate media, we need outlets like Double Down News. Make sure you sign up for their Patreon.